Hello and welcome to Philosophy Roulette. Hey, Cinesemiotics, good to see you back. Yeah, hope's all well with you. More Philosophy Roulette over here on my side. Just reading random crap. I hope you're well. Yeah, so welcome to Philosophy Roulette for anyone who doesn't know. Basically, I read random philosophy papers for the benefit of, the live viewing audience like Cinesemiotics, and for everyone else later on YouTube. I have to start emailing the people who write these papers because they tend to like the feedback. Although I've been meaner lately. I haven't been as forgiving as I've been in the past. So I don't know if they I don't know. I like the name of this journal though. It's Oh Dear. What is this? Portuguese? Something. Yeah. So, Cinesemiotics, do you have any suggestions on what I should read tonight? Otherwise, I guess be similar. Oh my god. Oh, thank you for the.
Science Semiotics subscribed. Science Semiotics says, oh, fascism lurks.
I completely forgot I had all that set up. I completely forgot I did. Yes, I have TTS on. It's a local TTS, so I was gonna do something with that. I forgot about I had it going, and you also got the fun little clip from Conan the Barbarian there going too. I hope you appreciate it, and thank you for the sub. Thank you, thank you. Fascism always lurks. I mean, I am American from the United States, as you can tell. We're going there. I completely forgot about that. Oh, yeah, sure. Annals of Pure and Applied Logic. Archive from Mathematical Logic. Ooh, Argumentation's a nice journal to read stuff in because it's, it's got, like, stuff to talk about because it's argumentation. Both Siderism by Scott F. Aiken and John P. Casey. I had a paper recently published, and I believe Scott F. Aiken was in that. So I'm going to go take a look at this. I'm going to wait on what Cinesemiotics has to say. But, let's see how long this is, because, yeah, this is too long to do. That's so sad. I don't like doing 20-page papers when it's a small font and just, like, no double spacing. But you got all this. Oh, look at all of that. But I mean, it might be fun. So this paper offers an account of a fallacy we will call both siderism, which is to mistake disagreement on an issue for evidence that either is a compromise on suspension of judgment regarding or continued discussion of the issue is in order. Okay, so basically the idea that you have to talk about both sides has that makes the issue relevant. Okay, so that sure would be fun, but let's see what else argumentation has. Let's see, do I have anything short? Let's find out if my search is working. It is working. We've got this review. Socratic irony and argumentation. This might be good to, Did I read this? I don't know. I don't think so. I could have. 2022. I don't think this must be something new. This is an in memoriam, modal qualification and speech act arguing in something. Interesting. So. No, nothing short in this whole area. That's too bad. These must be old forthcoming things. Let's see. So we've got, where was that one? see if we can find it again real quick. Socratic irony and argumentation. I feel like I might have read this, unfortunately, which is not good. I got one, but I need a minute to get it available. I mean, if you have a link, maybe I can find it reasonably quickly. It's possible. Just send the link, and I will try to, do something about it if I can. Looks like this journal also publishes in other languages. I did not know they did. Demanding a halt to meta discussions. Interesting. That's why I went forward to the uncategorized stuff, not the previous one, 2021. That's why I didn't have the page numbers on it. Designing critical questions for argumentation schemes. Sounds interesting. Review. Let's see what we got from Cinesemiotics. Film language paper. Oh, it's just... Okay. Okay. Journal of Aesthetic Education. 47 to 56. Oh, that's nice and short. Sure. Let's go for it. Yeah. Excellent, excellent. So, what are we calling this? This is Film Language by Edward W. Hudlin. Let's get everything hooked up then. Looks good with the all caps. Maybe I should do that more often for the author name. Let's see if it's in here. I don't know if it'll be in here, but it might be. By Hudlin, no. We only got, well, could still be here. There's other things. We got a semiotic cinema from 1974. But yeah, I don't see the one you just posted. Drop caps. Yeah, well, if I could do drop caps, like, fonts are a little bit more, they tend to be way more complicated in broadcasting than I expect. Well, they're always complicated, actually. Like, getting the typography right is reasonably difficult, actually. Quite often, like, extremely difficult to get typography just the way you want it. Yeah. You just published it for me. Thank you. Okay, so this is Edward W. Hudlin, the Journal of Aesthetic Education. And, yeah. Cool. Illinois Press. So we're going to read this and find out what is going on. Do I need to do anything else? Oh, I need to, you know what we're going to do? Let's put the JSTOR link up. Well, what just happened there? That was weird. That was really weird. One sec. That was not supposed to happen. Whatever that, like, he thought that might happen, like, that was not what I was expecting to have happened. It popped up in yeah. No, I'm just doing some what's it called? Just getting the link in the chat. So if anyone else shows up and they want to know what we're talking about, they can go find it. We can also, like, do go back to your link if they want to download it. But I like to keep the this way, so if anyone wants to know it, this link will also be in the okay, thank you, Cinesemiacs. But yeah, I just want to have the official link in the show notes for whoever comes upon this on, like, say, YouTube or whatever, and they want to get the official link. Okay. Oh wow, we're doing, like, Pudovkin and Eisenstein. All right, here we go. So, Film Language by Edward W. Hudlin, Pudovkin and Eisenstein, and Russian Formalism. Philosophers concerned with giving an account of language often have the problem of separating language from non-linguistic systems that seem to have a similar function. We generally take for granted the idea of language having a conceptual meaning until we encounter claims that non-linguistic items such as pictures, musical compositions...
You're winning, sir. Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you
Sign
for the...
semiotics gifted 1 bits. Sign semiotics says, seems good one.
Thank you, Cinder Semiotics. Yeah, see, I got the alerts going on that too. That just amuses me. Okay, we generally take for granted the idea of language having a conceptual meaning until we encounter claims that non-linguistic items such as pictures, musical compositions, gestures, and the like also have conceptual meaning, and thus constitute a language, or are, if not quite a language, a near relation. A definition of language as a system of symbols which combine in some ways but not in others, and whose combinations determine meanings, however, allow many items not previously thought as languages suddenly to become candidates for that title. For this reason, philosophers of language should concern themselves with the claims of many film theorists that cinema art is a candidate for a language system, either by itself or as part of some other pre-existing language system. Oh yeah, I mean, lots of danger. I know that some of my alerts will get me banned on YouTube, actually.
You're winning, sir. Oh, thank you very much.
I need to get a thank you for
Sign
the 100
semiotics
bits.
gifted 100 bits. Sign semiotics says, triggered 100.
I'm gonna, one of these times, I'm gonna try to, I'll get like, once you up the bit amount, I'll have different alerts, but they're all the same at the moment. So you've seen currently the subscriber alert, and you have now seen the bits donation alert. There's a follower alert. There's a ban alert. The ban alert gets me kicked off YouTube. I have to mute the stream. But yeah, it's completely worth it. Yeah, okay. So basically, what are we talking about here? We're talking about that when you start trying to define language, more things can, count than what we normally think of as language. And then so we're talking about cinema art as a kind of near relation of language. I guess the question then really is, where is the borderline of language as opposed to any other thing? Yeah, and I've got my automatic socials being clicked. If you want to click I have a Discord. I don't really use it, but sometimes announcements get there. So okay. In what follows, I will survey briefly some of the claims made about the presumed nature of film as language and some of the problems that arise. I will consider 3 views of film as language. 2 from the most influential critical school of the past, the Russian formalists, Pudovkin and Eisenstein, and 1 from the most influential contemporary school of film criticism, the British semiologists as represented by the writings of Peter Roulette. I mean, I've heard of Eisenstein and Pudovkin. I mean, I don't know much about it, but I've heard the names, and I do not know anything about Peter Roulette. One way of regarding film as analogous to literature is based on a comparison between the structure of verbal language and the function of visual imagery in the cinema. Films are thought to be read like novels, meaning that 1, the filmic image is considered logomorphic, and 2, editing is thought to constitute a syntax. Thus, words are compared with shots, sentences with sequences, paragraphs with scenes, cuts and fades with punctuation, etc. Okay, so that's super cool. I never really considered much of this, but you can sort of set up a parallel. Oh, I don't know. I am not. Don't worry about me about name dropping. I don't give a rat's ass about name dropping. You see me, I read any and all people come, and I'll criticize the hell out of everybody. So, it's fine by me. I'm more sorry when I can't read their names. I feel bad I get people's names. I butcher them. Anyway. That's what scared you off at first? You couldn't ignore all the, wait, who is that? Yeah, maybe it's because I was an arrogant little git when I was younger, but I was reading this philosophy stuff, these big names. I was like, this is stupid and I don't like it. I don't care how famous this person is. It's wrong. Of course, I didn't know what I was talking about at the time, but I was just this makes no sense whatsoever. I still think it makes no sense, but for different reasons now. But yeah, so I never actually had a problem with people name dropping. I think other people got insulted when I was didn't give a rat's ass, but I still don't give a rat's ass. Anywho, Pudovkin is typical of those authors who suggest that words and images function in similar ways. To the poet, he says, separate words are as raw material. They have the widest and most variable meaning, which only begins to become precise through their position in the sentence. To that extent to which the word is an integral part of the composed phrase, to that extent is the word's meaning variable until it is fixed in position in the arranged artistic form. To the film director, each shot of the finished film serves the same purpose as the word to the poet. The film is not shot, but built up from the separate strips of celluloid. Cinesemiotic says, I think it's my ADHD, but it always trips me up. The questions overload me, so I have a high threshold for what counts as understanding. That's fair. It's very hard if you have to, like, go through things in a sequential order, and if you can't, like, put it all together like some other way, like ADHD or something else, like it can really, like, I know people have had a lot of trouble with philosophy in the way it's written because you get tripped up all the time by concepts, ideas, or whatever. Like me, I'll read it, I'll say, yeah, screw it, I'll figure it out later, come back, figure out what they were trying to say. It's not a big deal for me, but I know other people have, it's not the same thing for other people when they're trying to read stuff. Okay, so this is interesting. So we've got, like, sentences is like strips of celluloid. So this is one of the things, is we've got a sequential theory here where you're reading certain things in time and also you're watching cinema in time. Yeah, I agree, cinesemiotics. It's how people sort of, like, put the world together, and you can do that in any number of ways. And so certain things will trip up different people, and that's how things are. Rome research, I'll have to check that out sometime. Yeah, so this is one of the things. They're making a parallel of the sort of temporal sequence of both the cinema and the written word. So in some sense, just as you folks out there are watching me scroll through this, that is sort of a visual, like, this is a theater where you're seeing the frames as they are displayed, well, the refresh rate on your screen, as it were, now, not the celluloid, but, like, you're seeing the frames on your screens being, like, shot as I'm reading this in the same sort of sequence. Hey, and there, I had a paper published in the Semiotics. I've got it on a timer, so you can see something I wrote. Alright, anywho, Pudovkin's view of cinema, then, is that the semantic and syntactic structure of film parallels that of literature. Images are analogous to words, editing is analogous to syntax, and the processes of artistic creation and appreciation are the same in each case. Given this view of the relationship between film and literature, it is not surprising that Pudovkin's approach to filmmaking is very literary and intellectual. For example, he thinks the process of making a film is one in which the scenario writer begins with some set of preconceived ideas set out in a rough script, and then writes directly on the film, substituting an image for each word until the written word is translated onto the screen and appears in plastic visual form. Pudovkin compares the making of a film with the laying of bricks. Each separate brick, that is, each visual image, is likened to a word, and the linkage between bricks, that is, editing, is claimed to be analogous to the syntax found in literature. I'm doing cinesemiotics now, and I'm doing it well. The example of this theater is an example of a genre, a new genre. Yes, well, I completely agree with that. What we're doing now is a very new thing. The idea that there's feedback in a movie sort of creation is a newish thing. I mean, there was always audience feedback on, like, a TV show. You mean, got the laugh track. But, yeah, like, meta thought going through this. Oh, and even better, cinesemiotics now. Here, I have something on top of that now. I've got a layer. So, you know, in one sense, they're saying, what was the line right here? Editing is now the syntax, blah, blah, blah. Where was it? Then writes directly in the film, image for each word. So, you know, that's interesting because I can be like, yeah. So now you get the meta idea going on top of it. Yeah, so this is what we're doing here, is that, and I see is, so yeah, so this is kind of what we're going on for. So every image is kind of like the word, and you put it together. Yeah. Okay. No, this is like interesting stuff. How do people conceive of how different sort of medium communicate? Like, is it the same sort of thing as in writing, where it's this sequential thing and then you can build it up in the same sort of way, or is there some other thing? Like, immediately I'm thinking, English is one thing because it's got words and you put them together. In other languages, they've got more symbols, like like the hieroglyphics. So I feel like more there are other languages that might be more, that would be closer to like theater and like visual, like movie stuff, because they're sort of these images like given like one after the other, and that's more like a like how a cartoon is built up, and like an image is like drawn out over and over and over. In English, in like these sort of like Western script languages where you've got lots of letters, it's put together slightly differently. I feel maybe this would be better in yeah, one of those. Hey, Cowdeer, how you doing? We're talking about how film is like a language. You put every image is kind of like a word. Every sequence is like a sentence, and every scene is like a paragraph. I'm okay. So we're reading a suggestion from Cinesemiotics here, and so far so good. But we're only on the first few pages, so we're gonna find out what the point is very soon. Okay, but Pudovkin's use of this analogy is sometimes confusing. The striking thing about a wall of bricks is that each brick maintains its integrity as a brick, regardless of the order in which the bricks are laid. By contrast, the integrity of the word, that is its meaning, shifts according to context. Pudovkin's bricklaying analogy therefore seems incompatible with his comparison between editing and syntax. Moreover, if Pudovkin's account were substantially correct, one should imagine that a reader would get almost as much understanding from reading a film script as he does from viewing the film based on it. There are other objections to the view that literary expression can be translated directly into visual expression. One is that since the meanings of words are conventionally fixed, Pudovkin's model for the interpretation of film would require the meanings of images to be conventionally fixed as well. That is, there would have to be an iconography of cinema comparable to that of medieval painting. See, that's interesting. It's kind of what I was saying, is like the pictures themselves have more significance in some sense than the words in English. And so, yeah, it seems like it's more fluid on the like what a scene can mean, or like just an image can mean, as opposed to where you've got defined definitions for words. Okay. In fact, Pudovkin does seem to suggest that images in the cinema are to be understood in terms of a primitive iconography. For example, his primary narrative vehicle consists of the use of stereotyped characters and situations to convey ideas to the audience. Thus, as Wallen points out, heroes wear white hats, villains wear black hats and mustaches. Yeah, I mean, this is like a thing people do, though. I mean, everyone has to do this, at least in some sense. Writers use tropes all the time. It doesn't have to be, of course, just heroes wear white hats, villains wear black hats. But like writers do this all the time too, so this is not so far off. Continuing, actors are chosen for a film whose faces already have a certain emotional and intellectual associations for an audience with normal social conditioning. Consequently, filmic images are already emotionally and symbolically funded, and one manipulates these visual symbols presumably as one does words. Again, for Pudovkin, the conventions of film language are based on literary conventions, and film is parasitic on literature. See, that seems a little unfair to call it parasitic on literature. It would just be an alternative kind of literature. Calling it parasitic seems a little bit, it's a little excessive. That's okay. Pudovkin seems to have conceived of filmmaking as the illustration of a text, the script. If the script contains a sentence, "a day passed," one finds the visual equivalent, for example, a shot of someone tearing a page off a calendar. It is significant to remember that Podovkin was a director of silent films and could use titles in the same way in which word bubbles are used in cartoons. In the silent era, explanatory titles often accompanied each sentence in the film. For example, the title At Home on the Range might be followed by a shot of a ranch house. In modern sound film, a narrator is sometimes used similarly to establish a link between the various images presented in the film. Significantly, this kind of parallelism between word and image is condemned by some critics who think such parallel editing is unnecessary. That's a good point. It feels like when they have to tell you something and not show it to you, it feels like lazy filmmaking. I was watching a movie a while back. It was one of the remakes, not the remakes, one of the new Alien ones. And there were two actors there, and they have like some computer-generated alien thing happening. And they go, "It's so mesmerizing." And let me tell you something. It was not mesmerizing. They had basically an infinite budget for a new Alien. It was a AAA Hollywood blockbuster, and they could not make a mesmerizing little CGI alien. And I was like, this is lazy that you had to say it out loud when you could have just shown it and would have been cool if I was also mesmerized by it. So, to be fair, like, it does feel like a lazy work when they sometimes have to tell you, but of course you have to get the people up to speed at other times too. So there's times when it's not worth it to do all the work, but I was very annoyed during that Alien movie, and it was like one from just a few years ago, when they clearly could have done a better job with the graphics department. Okay. Of course, Podovkin could maintain that these devices have become unnecessary only in the modern cinema precisely because contemporary filmmakers can rely on the audience's knowledge of these earlier conventions. In the modern cinema, for example, I'm saying cinema, not cinema. If one wants to show the passage of time, one might cut from a night scene to a day scene, or from an empty ashtray to one filled with butts, but these methods seem clearly derived from the earlier practice involving the use of a calendar or clock to indicate a transition. I mean, well, what else would you be doing if you're going to do something that is like a sequence over time? I mean, I'm sure someone does come up with something, but I mean, you show like it gets dark out or whatever it is. Yeah. Podovkin's view does, however, seem problematic in other and more complicated ways, and in these ways, film appears disanalogous to literature. Podovkin blurs the distinction usually made in the visual art between depicting an object and portraying one. Da Vinci created a painting which depicts a smiling woman. The title of the painting informs us that the woman portrayed is Mona Lisa. Thus, what is depicted is understood by looking at the painting. What is portrayed, however, need not be a feature exhibited by the work. If Da Vinci had changed the title to Marion, for example, a different woman would be portrayed, though what is depicted would remain the same. In the cinema, too, titles and words are sometimes changed up to alter the characters portrayed. For example, in Woody Allen's What's Up, Tiger Lily? We might therefore argue that the mediumistic basis for film interpretation hinges on what is depicted, not on what is portrayed. That is, the image itself does not seem enough to establish the meaning. Well, the word itself on the page is not enough to establish which meaning the word has. I mean, a sentence can have a lot of meanings, and you can take it different ways because every word can have multiple ways of reading it. And so, yes, sometimes what you're doing is clear, but I think sometimes in language too, you can have different sorts of depictions and things like that based on who knows what reasons you do. But like, it's just not always so clear in language that this what is depicted is different from what is portrayed in language. In literature, however, the distinction between depiction and portrayal is usually not made. Usually not. That's what I'm saying. But it could be made. But they're saying usually not made, since in order to change what is portrayed, the words which make up the work itself would also have to be changed. As Edwards point out, in literature, the reference to what is portrayed occurs in the medium, that is, words. See, not always. I mean, the medium that the literature is delivered in is like a book. But if you didn't deliver it in a book, then maybe you can do other stuff. And so it's not so clear that, because you don't get, who gets a book like delivered directly to your mind. Maybe we can do that in the future. Can't do that yet, but like there's still more to it than just the words. In literature, then, the words convey both what is depicted and what is portrayed. We may therefore argue that Pudovkin, in his literary approach to the cinema, has blurred the distinction between depiction and portrayal and given us only one sense, the sense of portrayal, in which the visual arts can be said to have meaning. Moreover, the particular basis for the interpretation of the film that he chose does not account for the meaning peculiar to film art. In other words, in making film strictly analogous to literature, Pudovkin fails to identify the difference that would establish the unique function of film as language. Certain images might come to represent certain objects due to verbal agreement or stipulation, but this does not tell us Thank you for the raid, Evolve Yourself. How you doing? Appreciate you stopping by. We're reading something about actually movies, and we got a little movie clip right there from there we go. So yeah, everyone go check out Evolve Yourself. So Evolve Yourself, I don't know what you're up to. Does meditation, does chess. Let me know what you were up to today. But yeah, cool. We were just reading something about film as language. How do you interpret film, and can you interpret it like a language? So as a fellow analytic philosopher, you might find this kind of interesting, because what the sort of the critics were saying. So that is the link of your podcast. What have you done there? Semiotics? Okay, so yeah, you've got picks very relevant to the discussion in progress. Okay, well, we can look at this in a half second. Let me just finish up describing to the folks what's going on right here. So like they say, like the image is kind of like a word, a scene is kind of like a sentence, the way the scenes are put together is kind of like syntax, and so then if you got like a whole bunch of scenes, that's kind of like a paragraph. And so yeah, let's see what Cinesemiotics has for us in this link. Oops, I misclicked. Oh. This is great. Okay. Yeah, so we've got Cinesemiotics going right now and doing meta-analysis, like meta-images of my stream is going. Oh my god. This is great. Look at me. Reversals, psychedelics, spinning thingies. Oh my god. Thank you, Cinesemiotics. This is the best laugh I had all day. Seeing myself sort of bent out of shape. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, it does also apply to us. That's right. We are doing things in real time. The cuts between scenes here can be thought of as like streaming syntax. Yeah. So yeah, that's fun. Thank you. Yeah. So this is what we're doing at the moment. Yeah. Okay. So this is fair. Like what they're saying is in that, since film has more options, I guess, is what the author is saying, that Pudovkin fails to identify the difference that would establish a unique function of film as language, because film seems to have different options available to it, because it can use images and other things that it can use, like, sounds, and also use language at the same time as doing other things. So in some sense, it's more sophisticated. At times than what you can do in literature. So literature, I guess, is that it is more restricted. than, because you could just have a film of like what I'm doing right now, me reading you the literature. You can do that in like a podcast or whatever. But when you have audio, you've got language, and then you've got images and cutscenes, you seem to have different options. All right, continuing. Podovkin's view seems related to the substitution theory of metaphor associated with Aristotle, since he seems to insist on 1, the reduction of visual metaphor to verbal metaphor, and 2, the reduction of these two to literal meaning. All this reinforces the impression that Podovkin wants to make film parasitic on conceptual language. Finally, Podovkin seems to be speaking of the...
You're winning, sir. Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you, Cinesemiotics.
Science Semiotics gifted 1 bits. Science Semiotics says, yes, pride 1.
That is the Cinesemiotics I'm describing. Okay. Finally, Podovkin seems to be speaking of the relationship between the artist and his work rather than the relationship between the work and the audience. Well, that could be okay. Anyway, this raises a question regarding one of the criteria of language, namely its meaning be public. Even if Podovkin's theory were a plausible explanation of how and why the artist chose the images he did and what significance these images had for him, it would not follow that an audience need interpret the film in the same way the author did. Hence, Podovkin may be charged with having committed the intentionalist fallacy as well. This is fair, but you know what? It might... Interpreting art is sometimes, quite often, we also say, the intentional meaning is what an artist, it has to do with what the artist says. So a lot of times in painting, you say there's an intentional fallacy. It's not a fallacy in painting, because what you want to get from the art, there's also what the public sees with it, but that doesn't mean that it's necessarily a fallacy. So yeah, of course Podovkin can be charged with it, but that doesn't mean it's really a bad thing to be looking at what the artist intended to do. Okay. Much of what Podovkin has to say is similar to the views of his colleague, the great impresario of Russian cinema, Sergei Eisenstein, who viewed film as a kind of hieroglyph or pictogram. Oh, so here's where we're going. This is like what I was thinking earlier. Hieroglyphs or pictograms, so I said like the ancient Egyptian writing. According to Eisenstein, the artist uses montage, editing techniques to combine shots, that is photographs, in such a way that an abstract idea or set of ideas is conveyed to an audience by means of metaphor and the association of ideas. Rejecting Podovkin's bricklaying analogy, Eisenstein held that the significance of shots is determined by context, and that from the collision of two different shots arises a concept. Thus, the meaning the audience finds in the film is not contained in the separate shots that make up the film, but what Bazin calls the abstract result of their organization. So we've got a straight up Hegelian thing here. You've got two different like opposing concepts, and then in their overcoming this abstract result, then you've got the meaning of their film. That's what makes up the film. So this is a much more Hegelian sort of sublation theory of how we understand things. So we've got different scenes, and then we kind of overcome them to get the total understanding of the whole movie. Okay. Eisenstein's view on montage, like Podovkin's view on linkage, were influenced by Kuchelov's experiments in the 1920s. In the famous experiment with the actor Moshukin, for example, Kuleshov presented photographs of Moshukin's face in combination with other shots to an audience and found that the reaction of the audience varied in accordance with the sequence of shots immediately preceding or following the shot of Moshukin. For example, Moshukin's face plus child equals Moshukin smiling. Moshukin's face plus corpse equals Moshukin is sad. Eisenstein concluded from these experiments that the meaning of each shot was dependent on combinations with other shots. Meaning, therefore, is determined by montage, that's editing, and editing is the foundation of film art. Thus, Eisenstein arrived at the notion that the film was a kind of hieroglyph or oriental picture writing. The image of a baby followed by the image of a mouth suggests a cry. The picture of a dog followed by the picture of a mouth suggests a bark. One may say that montage marks the transition from the simple animated photography of Muybridge to the birth of the cinema as a unique narrative art form. Semiotic says, just to keep in mind this was written in 79, which makes it all the more interesting vis-a-vis what we take it to mean now in contemporary film or film in general. Yeah, that's a very good point, because what was going on in the 70s and 60s, or whatever this author was looking at in terms of the history, we've got another 50 years of work that has gone on, like, with respect to this. So now, I don't know my film history enough to know exactly what the differences are between now and then, but I mean, you might consider stuff like the movies of, like, I know some of the movies of that era. You can think about those movies, and that's what this author was, like, looking at the time. So yeah, I mean, I was just thinking of, like, The Shining or something. So, and speaking of, it's May the 4th, and I'm sorry to do this, but I mean, Star Wars came out in the late 70s, so that's right coming out when this paper was written. So, if you think about, like, that sort of storytelling right there, that is contemporary with this paper. Once these conventions are understood, they become the basis for cinematic expression. For example, one of Hitchcock's films portrays the murder of a woman riding on a train. We see the seated woman. We see the murderer's shadow on the wall advancing toward her. We know that soon she will notice the intruder, open her mouth, and scream. She finally does see him. Her eyes grow wide, she opens her mouth, the camera cuts quickly to a long shot of the train from the outside, and we hear the train's whistle screaming through the night. The hieroglyph becomes the basis for visual metaphor. Cinesemiotic says, narrative differences never change. Kubrick was trying to prove that, by trying to disprove it. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, see, I don't know enough about what Kubrick was, like, thought he was up to, and the history that he was working in. This is my own, like, lack of understanding of, lack of knowledge when it comes to this area. But yeah, it's like, this is interesting because, like, this sort of sequence, and then you've got the visual metaphor of the or the auditory metaphor of the whistle screaming, as for her screaming. In 2001, A Space Odyssey, he said he wanted to try and break storytelling, but admits he couldn't succeed. Oh, interesting. So he thought he was jumping around and breaking the storytelling. It's going to be super hard because, cinema, just like reading, is a sequential thing. You're always doing things, like, in time in these things. You're not getting everything at once. When you read a book, you can actually go back and forth and talk about one time, but it's very hard in this sort of in theater, in movies, all that sort of stuff, because you always are getting pushed through the time. When I'm reading this, I can stop and just keep rereading the same sentence over and over. So it's a difficult thing to break the narrative because we're so used to it. I wonder about that. Like, is there a way to break it? Could you force someone to watch the same thing over and over? It's like, if someone just keeps hitting the back button, like, go back 5 seconds, go back 5 seconds. That's still in time, but, like, if the movie, like, gets glitched and keeps doing it, like, how does that change the narrative? I don't know. Yeah. I'd have to be better at this to understand how to really switch up visual storytelling. Okay, anywho. In Eisenstein's view, conventions of the cinema are based on the cultural associations which these images have for an audience. Oh, hey, what's up, Infernal? We're talking about movies and language, and sort of the different theories on how movies can be treated like languages, like images like words, and, like, cutscenes like syntax. You watch movies that way. Yeah. Well, yeah, but this is, like, your business, cinesemiotics. You like this stuff. I'd just be like, well, to be fair, I will go back and rewatch stuff too. Yeah, so this is what we're talking about. If you can't tell that cinesemiotics is likes their cinesemiotics, we're talking with reference to semiotics. The author here is also talking about with reference to photography. Yeah. So yeah, this is something you might actually like this paper. It's short, and they're talking about film as language and how it's either is sequentially ordered, similar to language, but then what else does it do? Yeah. So if you just stick around, you'll see what's going on. It's not that it's not like it's so hard to like grasp a hold of. All right, continuing. In Eisenstein's view, conventions of the cinema. Actually, you know what we could also do? Just give Anne a shout out. You can also go check out Anne Fernal, who streams and is awesome and plays games and does like sociology and research and cool stuff. So, yeah, where was it? In Eisenstein's view, conventions of the cinema are based on cultural associations, which these images have for an audience. Thus, like other languages, film language rests on a pre-existing code, a code based on not on artificial convention, but on psychological laws and associations. For Eisenstein, our interpretation of these animated images depends ultimately on certain primitive, magical associations that images possess for man. Film language therefore refers to a natural code. Just as we instinctively know the significance of
compliments of the house.
Thank you, Cinesemiotics.
Science semiotics gifted and Fernal a sub. Science semiotics says.
Oh, I forgot there's no words on that one. I gotta change that. I completely forgot about that clip I had associated with gifting subs. But thank you again. Yeah, okay, so film language therefore refers to a natural code. So this is like an innate language that film language is going for. Just as we instinctively know the significance of someone's driving a pin through a voodoo doll, we recognize sympathetic and contagious magic when the film heroine destroys the hero's photograph, or for that matter, when the cameraman manipulates the plastic qualities of the virtual image presented to the audience. But Eisenstein's theory of cinema, though suggestive, is far from clear. Eisenstein seems to suggest, at least in his remarks about montage, a basis for film language not parasitic on the verbal code. New concepts are said to arise from a collision of images. It is unclear, however, exactly how these concepts arise, how the abstract result is obtained. He speaks of dialectic of images analogous to Hegelian logic, in which the choice of the initial image dictates the choice of the second dictates the third, and so on until the film is completed. Okay, so here we're going straight up, I think, semiotics with Hegel. So you've got one image, then you link it to the next one, to the next one, to the next one, and you've got like sort of a grouping of symbolism here. So that's kind of how the author is saying Eisenstein is doing it, but the problem is that's not a full theory of language. That's sort of like a structural description, but it doesn't tell you actually what it means. So yeah, but the choice of images, the shots, by the artist as well as their interpretation by an audience depends on established convention. Is Eisenstein's system then really only an elaboration of Pudovkin's substitution theory? Yeah, because Pudovkin was substituting images for words, as I have like written on the screen, so that like you can say, all right, so this image is kind of like this word, and then this grouping of images is kind of like a sentence or a paragraph. But like if you're doing it this way, then you've got like a semiotic sort of structure where you've got all these things going together, but then that is also just getting translated back onto getting mapped onto a sentence or some sort of concept again. Okay, Wallin claims that what drives Eisenstein's dialectic is composition. That's right. I should remember these words, but I don't. Wallin claims that what drives Eisenstein's dialectic is an effective logic, a series of emotional stimuli or shocks accompanying the images. This does suggest a non-verbal code and also a non-abstract result, that is, emotional excitation. Wallin suggests that what Eisenstein means by montage of attractions is the communication of sensuous images imagistic thoughts as opposed to logical concepts to a suitably conditioned audience in order to evoke specific emotional responses and emotional way of thinking on the part of the viewers. For this reason, Eisenstein is often said to have evolved a theory of propaganda rather than art. Like Pudovkin, Eisenstein based the convention of the cinema on typography, a stereotyped appearance. If this is what Eisenstein meant then, drawing on the interplay theory of metaphor, one might suggest that the object of his efforts was the creation of myth. But whatever specific ideas Eisenstein may have entertained regarding metaphor, magic, and myth would be found in those portions of his work that remain to be translated. We can therefore only guess at his ultimate position and how the theory might be defended. Yeah, so because this is a 1979 paper, you might wonder if we do actually know better about what Eisenstein was thinking about these topics. In any event, if we follow Eisenstein's suggestion that the cinema is an ideogram, we arrive at the notion similar to Pudovkin's that images have the status of calligraphy or character writing, and that cinema is primarily an extension of verbal language with meaning fixed by convention. This means that the iconography of the cinema is established through typage, and that the art of film is, as a result, even less than illustrated storytelling. It is but a text. Is it? Because it seems like you're getting a lot of metaphor all at once. In verbal language, you're only getting so much metaphor at any one point. What was that? Something just loaded here. Okay. But you can do more than one metaphor at a time in some sense. In theater, in film, you can see more than one thing at once. And so it seems like a very, very fast, it's just reducing it, being reductionary to text seems a little fast here. Anyway. On the other hand, the montage of attractions goes beyond Pudovkin to suggest a purely visual form of narrative art, but it is difficult to understand the concept of a language whose rules cannot be formulated or expressed. Eisenstein's notion of effective logic seems to reduce meaning in the cinema to a gesture. A sock in the jaw, cinema becomes a mime or theater. Yet the basis for understanding this gesture remains obscure. Here we need an elaboration of Eisenstein's views on how such gestures come to be understood by an audience, whether on the basis of established conventions or on the basis of some Jungian stirring of racial memories in the presence of primordial architect types saturated with magical mythic associations. And Fernald says, cinema is basically, to me, figurative communication, and it can be a complex metaphorical organism. Yeah, and so the author here really seems to think that it can be like what these the famous critics were saying is highly reductive, and they're saying, look, if it isn't, we don't have a story of how it's not, though. I mean, I don't know enough of the history to tell you if, like, yes, they thought it was something other over and above the language, but that's the question is, it seems like it's a more sophisticated metaphor than you're getting in a language. You're getting something richer. So, okay. Another possibility, however, is that Eisenstein's notion of effective logic may really be an attempt to formulate an emotive theory of meaning along Burkean lines. If this is the case, then what we need is a theory of psychology to serve as an underpinning of his interpretive model. This matter deserves investigation and a great deal more analysis of the emotional associations of images and words than Eisenstein devoted to them. Yeah, so if you're going to straight up associate theater with psychology, you need a full psychology to talk about. Now, to be fair, a lot of psychology is based on metaphors and things like that too, so I don't know how far off this might actually be. All right. Peter Wolin and semiotics. And yeah, as always, you guys keep chatting. Let me know what you're thinking, because it's interesting stuff, and I definitely don't know. You guys know more than I do. Like many contemporary thinkers, Peter Wolin takes a semiotic approach to the cinema, which attempts to relate the elements of language to non-linguistic elements in the cinema. After the manner of Peirce, Woolen construes photographs as having a threefold sign function, serving as icons, indexes, and symbols. An icon is a sign that refers to its object by virtue of a resemblance between them. Thus, a particular paint sample can be used to represent a particular can of paint because of the color resemblance. A photograph would seem to be a perfect icon. In fact, we often speak of photographic likeness, meaning that the resemblance between a portrait and model is considered absolute. An index is a sign that refers to its object by virtue of a causal relationship between the two. A footprint, for example, is a sign that a man has passed by. Similarly, photographs are thought to be perfect indexes because of their recording function, which makes them unique among the arts. A photograph is always of something. It is an image fashioned by nature, a drawing made with light. And there is always a presumed causal connection between model and portrait. A symbol is a sign that refers to its object by virtue of convention or established reference. Thus, red means stop. Whether photographs can function as symbols seems debatable, though. Woolen suggests that they can. In the cinema, at least, the meaning of photographic images can be fixed by convention. Yeah, so quick rundown of semiotic theory. Now, can there be... there's definitely tropes, and so that does seem like certain things in cinema are going to be conventional and somewhat fixed. I can think of like James Bond or something. There's going to be like James Bondy scenes that are always going to be the same, conventional. Cinesemiotic says, Freud provided the framework. Hitchcock literally built his sets in a house to represent superego in an attic or a top floor, ego as straightforward outward self. Then, of course, the dark, dirty id in the basement. Shame. But yes, Freud himself got these ideas from literature, classics, and others. Yeah, these ideas have been floating around for a while. Some people just say it better. Okay, so let's see what Woolen has to say now. Woolen develops a tripartite view of the cinema, classifying various critics according to whether their interpretation of film is based on the notion of icon, index, or symbol. Critics who interpret film as imitation of nature emphasize the indexical function of photographs. Critics who construe cinema art as language for communication with an audience stress the symbolic function of the photograph. Critics who see cinema as a vehicle for expression concentrate on the iconic function of the photograph. Cinesemiotic says, so it's like Freud updated the tropes to modernize them so we could get back to making movies using modernized framework. Yeah, you can see a lot of, people have been basically pretty similar for a long time. Some people do just say it better. It's true. Some people just are dumb, though, which is also a problem. They don't say anything. But, it's like, we've had, especially in philosophy, there's people who said things thousands of years ago and they still say it better then, but then it gets updated and people argue about the updated arguments nowadays in contemporary philosophy. But have they actually done anything more than Aristotle did say? Not always. And Phil says, yeah, in the evolution itself, like Orson Welles' dramatic shift in visual storytelling that we now consider obvious and natural to more metaphorical stuff like Kubrick, etc. Yeah, this is what happens. Things look obvious now. It was not obvious when they got done the first time. If we know it's not the gods talking to us, we need an explanation that is more contemporary. Yeah. And the funny part is sometimes the gods got it right, but we just can't accept that interpretation anymore. According to Woolen, literature and film are alike in that all three kinds of signs appear in both, but they differ in that verbal language is primarily symbolic and cinematic language is mainly indexical and iconic. These functions again are not exclusive, and all three signs may appear in the cinema. Although the different shots that make up a film comprise all three dimensions of the cinema, the syntactical structure, like language, is iconic. Thus, a sentence like Veni Vidi Vici reflects its own temporal sequence of the events it describes. Similarly, according to Woolen, the order of the shots determines the temporal sequence of events on the screen. We might wonder how he accounts for the phenomena of the flashback or flash forward, but presumably they could be explained, although he does not do so, in terms of the special conventions which have become part of cinematic tradition. Yeah, you have to do something a lot of times to show that something's a flashback or flash forward. And if you've got these like weird, not weird, but if you've got like different time periods going on, like out of like normal temporal sequences in TV shows or art or whatever, or even in books, it does confuse the viewer until they figure out what's going on. So, but yeah, it's generally there's some sort of internal convention of the art that shows when something is. I was watching The Witcher a while back, and you couldn't tell exactly what was going on when, because The Witcher is very, very old, and so he looks the same, but times change, can change drastically, and so you have to use other things, and they do other things to show when time is before or after. Confusing the viewer until they figure out what's going on. One of the signs of good storytelling in film. Sometimes it's good and sometimes it's just frustrating. Like, oh, why didn't they just make this clear to begin with? I mean, I remember I always loved Jurassic Park, and certain things happen slightly out of sequence in Jurassic Park. Yeah, the Odyssey's a giant flashback, of course, and what's it called? Fight Club I was thinking about recently. Don't know why I was thinking about it, but I was thinking about that. That one starts off at the end of the movie too. So, yeah. Anyway, Wolin's use of semiology as a basis for creating a meaningful language of film. Confusing while assuring. Yeah. See, that's clever though, cinesemiotics. Like, if you can assure them even though they don't know what's going on and they don't feel bad about it. But that's hard. Yeah, you have to use layers of narrative. Yeah. Okay. Wolin's use of semiology as a basis for creating a meaningful language of film criticism, however, seems hampered by two problems. One, there is the problem of explicating the notion of sign. Apparently, each kind of sign functions in a different way. But the question arises whether there is some common function all signs have that makes them signs of one kind or another. This common function is generally thought to be that of one thing standing for another. We therefore must make sense of the concept of standing for. Historically, it has been difficult to account for this relation. However, even if we grant for the sake of argument that standing for has a single meaning applicable to all three kinds of signs, another problem still remains. When do we know that a sign is to be construed as an icon, index, or symbol? Yeah, this is classic problems. How do you actually analyze anything given philosophy? Can you give a quick definition of semiology versus semiotics? I don't know the definition of semiology. I mean, we can look it up, but the problem here, I was thinking about this, is that I don't know what it may have meant 50 years ago either. So, and right here, it's Wolin's use of semiology. So I don't have any idea if we can actually pinpoint what actually is getting the term, is how it's different from semiotics versus something else. Yeah, because it's not like, I've not seen that term before, and Anne says it's minimal. Okay, so I just assumed it's somewhere in the nature, like, because given the rest of the paragraph, this is just sort of the way you're understanding the terms in the semiotics. So that's kind of how I was taking it. It's sort of like the science of it's sort of a metasemiotic analysis, because it's the basis for creating meaningful language of film. And Fernal says, more technical in the study of symbols and meaning. Okay, and so semiology is more structured, and that's more technical. And so semiology, I guess, would be slightly less or slightly different. Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Semiotics. I appreciate it. I need to be led around sometimes. Okay. Obviously, there must be some sort of cue or rule which indicates which sign function of, say, a photograph is operative. Consider the photograph of a woman taken at such a great distance that she appears as a tiny dot in an otherwise undifferentiated field. Is the photograph an icon, index, or symbol? The picture would probably not be taken for a representation of a woman, since by convention the image would have to be more characteristic in order to represent a woman, either iconically or symbolically. The image of the woman would have to be larger, for example. Similarly, if one wished to photograph a sphere in a way that the resultant picture functioned as an icon of the sphere, certain lighting, focus, and other camera effects would be used to make sure that the sphere would not be mistaken for a circle or for anything else. Clearly, what counts as an icon is a matter of convention, and whether a photograph is an index, whether the sky is a natural color or tinted, for example, also seems a matter of convention. Hence, the distinction between the three sign functions are blurred. Hudlin then seems to need some sociolinguistic theory on which to base his theory of signs. Semiotics superego is semiology. I will leave that to your discussion. In conclusion, it would seem that the analogy between visual language in film and verbal language is not easily established. Two problems that need to be dealt with are, 1, whether cinematic meaning is conventional, that is, parasitic on literature or verbal meaning, or whether it has some other basis for meaning derived from natural or psychological associations. An even more fundamental problem is, 2, that these theories of film meaning imply a model of language as a system of signs or symbols governed by rules, and many of the criticisms raised against these film theories can also be raised against such conceptions of language. Until the larger question of what constitutes a language is decided, theories of film language must remain speculative. Conversely, if a reasonable claim can be made that the film does constitute a form of language, then a broader theory of language cannot be developed without taking account of such non-linguistic system of meaning. Therefore, the theories of film language found in the literature of film criticism deserve more attention from and investigation by those concerned with the philosophy of language than they have hitherto received. Okay. You're using Spanish. Okay. Semiotics would have to be Hegel. Okay, so what's gone on here? Yes, Anne's hitting the Spanish. Okay, so basically, here's the issue here. It looks like this author is surveyed the way that film critics have treated film as a kind of language and found that, we don't have any firm basis for doing this because there's too many problems getting to establish a direct relation. From my side, knowing more of the philosophy of language stuff, it's like, well, we don't have fixed theories of meanings in philosophy of language either. There's multiple, hey, reprimand her too. I do not reprimand my chat. You'd have to do something very bad. Since we don't have fixed theories in meaning, or there's stark disagreement about them, the idea that we're going to have any real way to, relate film to language is not going to hold up under any theory because there's too many shifting theories of meaning in language to begin with. Now the question is it illegitimate to even try? And I don't think the answer is no. I think the answer is you can go ahead and try, and you might get something out of it, because then you're going to have an interplay between philosophy of language and philosophy of film, and that would be cool. And like the author, I think, recognizes that. Yeah, I'm definitely fascist. This is my stream, and what I say goes. So, you guys have to live with that. Yeah, so, right. So the question is then, like, whether cinematic meaning is conventional. What is language? Is linguistic meaning conventional? Conventional on what? Maybe just normal language is parasitic on sort of our sense data, and maybe the cinematic meaning is actually closer to the sense data than our linguistic meaning. And in that case, then you could even say that, like, philosophy of language is parasitic on the sort of the stream of consciousness, and then maybe the film language is closer to that, and that would be more fundamental. And maybe that's why we get mesmerized by things. We get caught up in stuff. We get caught up in film because it is closer to meaning than, the verbal language. I don't know. It's just the question is, where is the structure here? Like, what are you pulling out? And like, so in that sense, it's like more asking a question about logic. What is the syntax here? What is the form? And that's the question. You can always put form and syntax into things. You can read it in, but what are you getting out of it? And the question is, these critics look like they have gotten something out. They've analyzed, the film using these concepts, and maybe they can understand something. But what exactly is that like? I mean, will there be to an end to what you can understand using these theories? And I don't know. Like, maybe you can't continuously just keep mining in the same way. You have to like do something new. You use one theory, like this sort of like syntax structure, this linguistic thing, to actually get as much as you can out of theater or a film, and then you have to move on to some other metaphor, basically. Okay, you guys have any more questions? It's a less abstract version of Saussure's description of the symbol as signifier signified. Yeah, I think this is close. I have not read Saussure in forever, so I do not remember exactly. But like that's what we definitely are getting close to. They had a discussion, I think, before you were here, of something very close to that. Yeah. So, any more? You guys have anything else to say? I don't have. I mean, I don't know enough about these things. I know more about Hegelian logic and dialectic than I know about film, which is probably not a good thing, really. But thank you, Cinesemiotics. I appreciate the suggestion. This has been a little bit of fun, and it's also interesting from the philosophy of language side, too. Cinesemiotics says, so like academically, there's Saussure, who proposed that all of linguistics should fall under a much larger study called semiology. Okay. Well, yeah, see, it's a system of signs, but it's very hard to, like, pin any of this down. Because, I mean, you're still doing the signs in language quite often. I mean, and wouldn't that just be, yeah, well, it's like, it's self-reflexive. It's not, like, subjective, yes, but, like, it's all, like, self-reflexive, and so it's incredibly difficult. So, yeah, context, in some sense, it's all embedded in places, too. So it's subjective, embedded, self-reflexive. This makes it very difficult to like tease out any one way of doing it. Cinesemiac says, I will just say that a lot of intellectual progress has been made and a lot of insight found since this paper was published, but it is a good background in how the question can be posed at the beginning of an answer. Yeah, I mean, I think this was a very well done paper because it really kind of showed in the examples of Pravkin and Eisenstein, two different ways of analyzing what's going on. So, yeah, like if you wanted to like show someone about semiotics and philosophy of language, you can show them this paper and say, hey, look, you can think about these, like how the film like demonstrates these ideas and how you can think of it different ways. So it was really quite good. Well done. Okay. But that's, I guess, it for this, unless y'all got anything else to say, but that's it for that for now.